I should make clear, though, that you can have a crypto asset that is itself a security. So I think that someday we could see a world in which traditional stocks are tokenized.
Sure.
Well, if you tokenize a traditional stock, it is definitely still a security.
Yeah.
You could tokenize a bond similarly. And so people do need to pay attention when they're creating crypto assets.
This content is brought to you by Uphold, which is one of the top crypto platforms in the industry. I've been a user of this platform for many years, so I can vouch for them. They have 260 plus cryptocurrencies, and best of all, they are secure and safe. They have a transparency report that you can go review. They are 100% reserve. They don't commingle or lend out your funds. And they just launched an amazing new product where you can earn up to 5% APY on your USD balance. So picture this, you take profits on your crypto trades. You now have the US dollars. You can leave it on Uphold and earn a great return. And here are the key features of this product, folks. There's no lockups. You can go in and out at any time. And it is FDIC insured, folks. FDIC insured up to $2.5 million for participating funds. And there are no monthly fees. So this is a great service, and I will be leveraging this. And this product, once again, just launched. So you can check it out, folks, and earn on your profit taking that you do from your crypto trading. So incredible stuff. If you'd like to learn more about Uphold and this new great service, visit the link in the description. Welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and with me today is SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce. Commissioner Peirce, it's great to see you.
Hey, Tony, it's good to be back. I, of course, as you know, have to give my disclaimer, which is that my views are my own views as a commissioner, not necessarily those of the SEC or my fellow commissioners.
Yeah, Commissioner Peirce, great hearing this week. We were talking a bit about it before the recording, very long, but you and the other four commissioners appeared before the House Financial Services Committee. That was really refreshing to get everyone from the agency, as far as commissioners, to give their different point of views. How do you feel that hearing went, and what were some takeaways for you?
Well, I think you're right. It was about showing different approaches to the job, and I think that's the beauty of a commission. There are five of us. We all have different backgrounds, and we bring something different to the job. And I think you saw that earlier this week at the hearing. You know, I think the big takeaways from the perspective of from my perspective, are that there's a lot of interest in crypto issues, that those issues did come up a lot. And then I think it's just really healthy to have a dialogue among people who all care about the capital markets, but who approach them differently. I think another theme that ran through the hearing was a real interest in capital formation, which is one part of our mission as an agency. It's a part that hasn't gotten a lot of attention during this past several years, and so I think there was understandably interest from Congress in what we're planning to do in that space.
And now there was a second hearing that was scheduled for Wednesday with the Senate folks, but that got rescheduled, if I'm not mistaken. Are you anticipating a similar type of hearing with the Senate side?
That hearing, as far as I know, was just with Chair Gensler. I don't know why it was rescheduled or when it will be when it will be held. So I don't know anything about that one.
Oh, okay. So I had the mistaken information there. I thought all five of the commissioners were going to appear again, but it sounds
maybe
like
you know more than I do. It's possible you know more than I
do. Commissioner Peirce, I would love to get your take on what we're seeing, kind of along the lines of what you were mentioning, this shift, and I like to call it the Overton window shifting for crypto politically, where we're seeing Democrats working with their colleagues on the Republican side to help get crypto legislation through, and you have these hearings where it's now both Democrat and Republican voices. Do you feel we were hitting the tipping point of mass awareness, so to speak, mass adoption, and everyone needs to pay attention now to this industry?
I mean, I've been thinking about these issues for a long time, and it definitely seems that they're much more top of mind for more people now. And so I think that's positive, although I think one of the reasons that they're top of mind for so many people is that this really is an example of how a regulator has mishandled a situation. And so I think that is what has pushed this to the top. And I should say, I mean, I focus a lot on the SEC. There are a lot of other non-SEC crypto issues that have gotten attention as well.
Mm.
But I think if we had sort of done this in a more methodical way, there'd be less attention being paid to crypto right now.
Oh, sure. Yeah. To your point, it has become sort of political where you have one side now is using it as a campaign uh item, right? So it's interesting. This election cycle, it's very interesting. If you told me a year ago that crypto would be one of the main themes or that the crypto industry would be spending the amount of money it is from a campaign donations standpoint, I would not have believed you. It's pretty fascinating what's
Even
happening.
take the politics out of it, which is not
Mm.
really my expertise, and focusing more on just the regulatory approach. We're spending a lot of time at the SEC thinking about crypto, and a lot of our resources are going toward these crypto enforcement actions.
Mm.
And one of the themes that I think it's really important for us to think about is kind of what could an alternate reality look like if we were to take a more workman-like approach to crypto and just say, okay, let's think about areas where we need to be involved, and then think about what does rational involvement look like, what would a rational set of rules look like, and then where could we concentrate our enforcement resources to do the most good. Those kinds of things, I think that's really what we should be thinking about. That's not really a political question. That's something that people on all sides of the aisle can get together and think about together and try to figure that out. You might have differences in terms of the role that government should play in those things, but those are the kinds of discussions that you can then have.
Yeah, agreed. So I noticed what you mentioned that because the agency did not act sooner or in the right way, it has kind of forced the industry to become a political item where it shouldn't have been, right? It's just a technology, like the internet or whatever.
Exactly. It's a technology, and I think this is another point that I like us to think about, not because we should sit around and say, well, let's imagine what it would have been like for the sake of imagining what it would have been like, but to think about how can we handle other new technologies that come down the pike. We're seeing artificial intelligence. It's not new, but we're seeing new uses for it, and new iterations of it. And so let's make sure that we don't repeat the same problems when we are confronted with a different technology. And let's try to do a reset in how we think about crypto. But I think one of the problems of us not having done this is that there's been a lot of emphasis, there's been a lot of retail interest, and I think we have not helped by not having clear lines, because it's made it harder for retail folks to sort of distinguish where there might be a there and where there isn't, where it's just a fraud. And so I think better rules will also just be helpful for retail folks, be helpful for us as we think about using our scarce enforcement resources.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can give some anecdotal evidence on my end as a podcaster. Obviously have a lot of retail folks who watch and listen. And I can't tell you the amount of stories of folks getting into situations where they're, "Oh, I thought this was legit, but it's actually a scam. How come the SEC is not stopping these guys? It's clearly something fishy is happening here." And then on the building side, I want to launch a DAO and have NFTs, but I'm scared the SEC might come after me, even though I'm not trying to launch any type of trading, just have utility NFTs where people can unlock features, get special perks and benefits. But I don't want to be in any legal issues. I'm a small time business owner, right? So we
And I
need the
think there are a
clarity.
lot of stories like that of people who have an interesting idea for how they might use the technology, and they're just kind of holding back because because there's this fear of getting on the wrong side of the securities laws. And I think with respect to, it always makes me sad to hear of people who have been taken advantage of by someone, a fraudster, using crypto to lure people in. And there are a lot of people out there who are trying to do that. So people have to be very careful. But I think part of the goal of getting a clearer framework is also so that you know what falls within the SEC's jurisdiction and what might fall within another regulator's jurisdiction. Sometimes when one of these really bad things happens in the crypto space, unfortunately, we can't get involved because it's not within our jurisdiction. But there may be another federal or state regulator who can get involved. And if the lines are clear, we can then make a referral over to that other regulator. And so again, I think the space would be, I mean, there are always going to be people trying to take advantage of other people, and they're going to use whatever the latest thing is. But I think it would be harder for those people to do their bad deeds if we were to have these clear jurisdictional lines.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts on, along the lines of what we were talking about before with Democrats and Republicans working together, thoughts on the crypto bills, the FIT21 bill that made it out of the House? There's one in the Senate, the Lummis-Gillibrand bill. There's talks of trying to get a bill pushed through the Senate by the end of the year, maybe in the lame duck session. I've seen Republicans and Democrats talk about this. Do you think those legislation would help in putting these lines in place?
Well, as I said at the hearing, I always welcome the input of Congress, and so getting a sense from them where they want those jurisdictional lines to lie would be very helpful for us then to think about how to spend our resources. So I do welcome it. In terms of the details of those bills, I leave that to people in Congress, though I think that the SEC should be assisting them with. We provide something called technical assistance to Congress when they're working on things, and so we should be stepping up to help them with that.
Mm. I want to talk about the term crypto asset securities or digital asset securities. I've heard Chair Gensler, and it's been mentioned in different legal documents as well. Recently, there was some folks who at the SEC who apologized about this in a Binance legal document footnote, yet it's being used in different places. Where did this term originate from? And it seems to be causing a lot of confusion.
Yeah, well, I don't know where it came from, but Tony, you and I have talked about this topic in the past, that there is some legal imprecision in how we've approached this issue. And, we've talked about the fact that the Howey test comes from a case about orange groves, and the orange groves themselves were not the securities. It was the orange groves when paired with this contract to do work related to the orange groves that turned it into a securities offering. And so I think in this connection, you have, Howey has generated this whole series of cases about casks of whiskey, about different kinds of animals that could be the subject of an investment contract, but it doesn't turn the chinchilla into the actual security. And so I think some of the linguistic problems are sort of stemming from this wrestling with how does this investment contract idea really manifest itself in the crypto space. And we haven't been precise about that. And so I think this is the one symptom of that.
I remember years ago, you and I talking about that, and you mentioned you've been speaking to the folks here at the agency about viewing this differently, the crypto assets that intrinsically they're not securities. Do you feel there's been some progress made? And I know sometimes these things take time and idea, and then collectively we agree, okay, this is how it should be viewed. Do you feel the agency is making some level of progress?
Well, I do think we're having to be more precise. I should make clear, though, that you can have a crypto asset that is itself a security. So I think that someday we could see a world in which traditional stocks are tokenized.
Sure.
Well, if you tokenize a traditional stock, it is definitely still a security.
Yeah.
You could tokenize a bond similarly. And so people do need to pay attention when they're creating crypto assets to whether or not they're doing something. Are they fractionalizing something? Are they creating a token that will kick off a stream of payments to people? I mean, they need to be thinking in those kind of contexts about whether something might be a security. So you can't make a blanket statement, no crypto asset is a security. But I think when we're thinking about crypto assets as the object of an investment contract, just because of statements made around how it was sold, those kinds of things, then we the SEC need to be more precise in those instances. And I think you're seeing that sort of developing now.
Yeah, that's a great point to delineate between tokenized assets versus the tokens that exist on blockchains, which help the utility function. But definitely agree with you that tokenized stocks, tokenized
Yeah, so
bonds, and all
people just
that.
need to
Yeah.
be careful. They can't, blanket rules don't work with the securities laws. It's always facts and circumstances. But that's why some of these statements that have been made around crypto coming from the SEC and other places, we need to be careful too. We can't make blanket statements either.
Mm. Let's move ahead to SAB121 or SAB121, as some would call it. I know you and I touched about this on this in the past, and there's been moves to have it repealed in the House and Senate. Ultimately, President Joe Biden vetoed it. However, we got news that certain banks and institutions may be able to bypass this, such as BNY Mellon. What can you tell us there? What's happening with this?
Well, first of all, I think it's amazing that a staff accounting bulletin got enough attention that it became the subject of so much congressional attention, and it actually, ended up the Congress wanted to get rid of it. It didn't end up making it past a veto, a presidential veto, but the point is that there's a lot of concern around the staff accounting bulletin. So why is that? A staff accounting bulletin is, as its name suggests, a staff document. It comes out without the typical process that would go with a rule. You don't have any time for people to comment on it. It's out there, and people technically don't have to comply with it because it's a staff document, but they feel that they have to comply with it because it reflects how the staff is thinking about things, and thus could, if you don't comply, could result in a very uncomfortable situation for you. And so it came out, it looked to me like a rule in the way it was written. And then it was applied at first to just public companies that are filing with us, right? But then it started being applied more broadly to broker dealers. It seemed to apply to everyone ultimately. And so the result of that was that you saw, and for people who haven't followed the debate as closely as you have, Tony, SAB 121 is basically about what does a company need to do from an accounting perspective when it's custodying crypto for customers. And so the result of it has been, because of its onerous effects, it has effectively led to most custodians not being able to play in this space. Mm. And so there's been just a tremendous amount of pushback from traditional banks, but also from people within the crypto space to say, hey, does this even make sense from an accounting perspective? And so it's been out there for a long time. People have been complaining about it for a long time. Then last month, I think it was, the chief accountant at the SEC, who's on the staff at the SEC, put out a speech and said, hey, we're making some exceptions here for people from SAB 121. And so people can go look at that speech to see kind of the conditions that might get you out of SAB 121. But that also strikes a lot of people as a little strange, right? You've got the staff bulletin, and then you've got a speech interpreting it, and it's a staff speech, and you got to go. That doesn't seem like a great way to do rulemaking. So why not instead just say, okay, if we're making exceptions for people, let's codify that so that everyone can comply with those conditions and get the exception. And so whatever we do in this space, we need to make sure that we have rules that people have been able to weigh in on, and that those rules then apply equally to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it just seems it muddies the water. I don't even know what's happening, and a lot of people are complaining about it, but it would be great to have these trusted custodians and banks which have been established, have insurance, have the proper security checks to be able to custody some of the underlying assets for ETFs like the Bitcoin ETF and Ethereum ETF and so forth. That would be, I think, very good for the market. One of the
Yeah, I
things,
mean, I think, yeah, that point is great, right? We need to have competition. We don't want to pick winners and losers in this space. We want everyone to be able to compete on equal footing. And having a world in which you have multiple custodians is tends to be a more uh, resilient world, right? It's better to have more people playing in the space. Playing may not be the right word, but offering custodial services.
yeah, for sure. Now, on the topic of ETFs, I would love to get your thoughts on the success of the Bitcoin ETFs. I mean, BlackRock has over 20 billion in its respective ETF, and then obviously the other issuers are doing well. This seems to be a hit with the market, the fastest growing ETFs in the history of ETFs, but it had to go over the legal hurdle and for the SEC to lose an appeal. In hindsight, I know you voted to have this approved, but in hindsight, does the agency, how are they looking at the success of the ETFs?
Well, we're not a merit regulator at the end of the day, so it's not really our goal to say, well, this product is successful or not. But certainly the inflows into those products have been, as you said, notable. And I this feeds into my point all along on these, which is let's just let the market make their decision. We might not want these products. If someone at a regulatory agency doesn't want to have those products, that's fine. But you have to have a reason for saying the market can't have it. And we didn't have a good reason for saying the market couldn't have it. And then once we did say that the market could have it, it turned out that a lot of people actually wanted it. And so it does make me question, which I had questions before, but by not allowing these products out much sooner than we did, what other products were people getting into, and were those products inferior to the products that they ended up choosing? I mean, again, we're not a merit regulator, so I'm not making any comment on whether people should or shouldn't have this product in their portfolio, but the market tells us that there were certainly people who were interested in having it.
Mm. Now, there's a big question. Well, I shouldn't say question. Let me reframe this. Obviously, the Ethereum ETFs got approved as well. But there's people in the market saying, okay, Ethereum is an altcoin, second largest behind Bitcoin. Bitcoin was established as a commodity for a very long time, going back years, since Jay Clayton was chair and so forth. Um, so folks are wondering, well, if Ethereum as a smart contract proof of stake network got an ETF, what about Solana? What about Cardano and so forth? Is the agency talking about these things? And I know there's lawsuits going on with some of these other tokens mentioned, but I guess what's the methodology here? They have Ethereum got the
Yeah.
approval, but what about the other proof of stake networks?
Well, first of all, people need to come in and ask, right? So that's the first thing. And there uh, was at least one applicant for a Solana product that I think got withdrawn. So again, people have to come in and ask. That's the first step. The second step is, we would look at it, honest facts and circumstances, as we do other product filings. Now, that said, people, the SEC, as people know, the SEC has not been necessarily easy to follow in this space, so it can be a difficult space, and I can't make any predictions on how any particular application would come out.
Gotcha. And but do you think that theoretically, if Congress is able to get a bill through the Senate and eventually a president signs it, that could help give the clarity and maybe next year Commissioner Peirce?
I mean, I think too, you have to look at, Bitcoin, both Bitcoin and ETH have futures markets,
Hmm.
and some others don't. That could be something that, that makes a market work in a particular way. Again,
Hmm.
I'm not going to make predictions about what will happen with respect to any particular other altcoin ETP. But, I'm always happy for people to come tell me why they think we should have them.
Question about the futures market, because I've spoken to quite a few ETF experts, and they said you don't necessarily need to have a futures market to have a spot ETF approved, but the SEC has done it. That's been the process, right? Why? Is it it adds some balance to the market, or what are some of the thought processes behind that?
Well, I mean, I think it depends, of course, on the particular product that you're looking at, the particular underlying that you're looking at. But I mean, having the futures markets for Bitcoin enabled us to make some, to understand something about the underlying market, for example. But again, as you say, you can have spot markets without futures markets. Uh, so that doesn't necessarily need to be a condition, but that makes ETH and Bitcoin look more alike because they both have a futures market.
Do you think that will be the standard moving forward, or that might
I
change?
really don't know. I mean, again, it doesn't make a lot of sense to try to read the tea leaves here because the facts and circumstances really do matter. And so when you talk about altcoins, you're talking about one of many, many thousands of possibilities. And so you really have to look at each one on its own.
Mm. Now, recently, I saw BlackRock, the SEC approved BlackRock's spot ETF options. Um, Tell us a bit about that, and are you getting a lot more demand? Is the agency getting a lot more demand for additional financial products around these ETFs?
I mean, I think that wasn't a surprise to people to see that sort of happen. That's a pretty natural kind of follow-on product. In terms of what the interest is for others, I don't actually know. Those come into the staff, and so there may be others that are out there that I'm not aware of.
Mm.
And so a
Um,
lot of I think it's important for people to know that a lot of decisions that the commission makes, I mean, ultimately everything rolls up to the commission, but there are a lot of just routine tasks that are delegated to the staff. And so you'll see a lot of these kinds of things. They just go through delegated authority, we call it. You saw that with the early Bitcoin exchange traded product disapprovals were staff, and then ultimately they got raised up and started being commission level decisions. But it's a little bit of administrative law, kind of in the weeds stuff.
mm. Um, I don't know if you can answer this because this gets a bit bigger into the macro of investing, but I'm sure it's a topic that may come up with the SEC. The modern day investors changing with social media. People can crowdsource on Reddit or Twitter or whatever it may be. And then you throw AI in the mix and AI bots and whatever it is. Um, is the agency looking to use artificial intelligence to help police, if that's the right word, police this or keep a track of all these things, AI to police AI, and even so many investors and the changing dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really great question. And I think we need to be looking at technology that way as a tool that we can use. Obviously, if the commission is considering using something like AI, um, we have to think about all of the implications of doing that. You don't want to build a surveillance state
Hmm.
without really, that can happen sort of inadvertently, that you can turn around and realize, oh, we've created a surveillance state. We're watching everything that everyone does in the markets all the time. That's one of the reasons that I've been very concerned about this consolidated audit trail tool that we're building. So yes, we should be using AI. It's a tool that we can be using to make our jobs as regulators, to make us more efficient as regulators. We have a lot of people, for example, who are reviewing filings by investment companies, mutual funds and exchange traded funds, and public companies. And that's something where if we can use AI to take away some of the more routine tasks, then we can focus our staff on the more complex tasks. And same with monitoring market trends and monitoring the use of AI by people in the market. So yes, we should be doing that. We develop tools at the SEC. We use these kinds of things, but we always have to do it with this care in mind, not to turn our country into something that we don't want our country to be. We do want people to have the freedom to transact and to interact with each other without being monitored all the time. That's really important, I think, as a core American value.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. Um, I don't know if you've seen this, but Congressman Warren Davidson had put out a bill called the SEC Stabilization Act, where it would essentially change the structure of the SEC in his words, to make it less political and have more balance, so to speak. Have you seen that? Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, again, I mean, I don't comment on legislation. I think it's always nice when we see people focused on our agency and interested in thinking about how it operates. So one of the things that a lot of people don't know about the SEC is that although we are a commission with 5 of us commissioners, the chairman has authority over the staff, the budget, and the agenda. Those are 3 pretty big things. And so as a result, I can suggest that items be added to the agenda or taken off the agenda. But ultimately, at the end of the day, staff is reporting to him and he's setting the agenda. So that's how things run. And so I think sometimes people think about other ways of, well, if 3 commissioners think that we should put crypto rulemaking on the agenda, then should it be on the agenda, for example? So it would be interesting to have that ability. I certainly would like that if I could convince 2 of my colleagues, hey, we ought to put something on the agenda here to put some definition around when a crypto asset is a security or is being offered and sold as a security. Then, if we could do that, that'd be great.
Mm. Commissioner Peirce, I know I asked you this months ago, but I'm curious if you changed your mind. If you were nominated to be chair of the SEC, would you take that job?
I'm really a lot more interested in trying to get the agency back on track than thinking about, we can't have the discussion always be about personalities, right? It needs to really be about what is this institution intended to do and what is it doing? And let's get those 2 things lined up again. And I think we have moved a bit away from where we're intended to be, and we need to have a realignment. That doesn't require a new chairman. That requires just a new commitment to protecting investors, facilitating capital formation, and fostering fair, orderly, and efficient markets, which is our job, and not trying to grab stuff that's outside of our jurisdiction, right? Just really focusing on those things and working with the public and keeping ourselves open to hearing input, right? Those are the kinds of things that it doesn't require a change in personnel. It requires a change in attitude, a change in culture. And that's what I'm more interested in focusing on.
On that note, in a change of culture, and I may be getting into left field here, but one of the things I was thinking about and looking back in the past, in the late 1800s to the early 1900s, there was the Industrial Revolution, and the candle and lamp makers got disrupted by electricity and light bulb. The horse and buggy folks got disrupted by the automobile, and so on and so forth. And then I see some of the political cartoons and the things that came out there. There was fear. There was people trying to tarnish this new technology. And obviously, looking back in hindsight, it took us into a whole new world and made our lives better and so forth. You think some of that is happening here? Change is harder for humans. They fear the technology. There's disruption happening. And going back to the collective mindset, it's a process. It may take years. and legislation, getting people in Congress to understand it, and they pass legislation and get people and get the agency to understand it better. Do you think there's a bit of that happening here?
Well, that's something that I worry about, which is that regulatory agencies, like other people, their regulatory agencies are made up of people. And so, like other people, we get used to things the way they are.
Mm.
And you get used to dealing with the same types of entities that you've dealt with for many years. The SEC just celebrated its 90th birthday this year. So we've been around for a long time. A lot of players have been around for a long time. And we've been, the system has changed. Our markets have gotten very electronic and fast, and that was something they weren't before. Commissions are very low now. People are using technology to provide investment advice, whereas before it was all, very human driven. And so there have been a lot of changes. But I think what you're seeing with something like the crypto world is you're seeing people coming in from the technology world and they're saying, hey, we have some new ideas about how to do things that may affect the financial industry as well as other industries. It's not just the financial industry. And so we want to try those things. And we're saying when we see that, we, the commission, see that, it does scare us a little bit, right? It scares us because it's a change in our world. It's a change in the people we're used to dealing with. It's a change in the way things are done. And you see this a lot when people talk about decentralization specifically, because we're so used to a world in which we have these centralized intermediaries. That's who we regulate. And so you see a lot of discussion coming out of my agency where people will say it's purportedly decentralized. It's always purportedly, right? And often that's true. Often someone says it's decentralized and they're really sitting, running it all on their server and they're in control of it. But if something truly were decentralized, it can be a real challenge to the existing way of doing things. And it does harken back to some of those earlier trends that you were talking about. We could be in a better world if some of the things in our lives were operated in this decentralized fashion, because it would mean that we would have more control, that there wouldn't be someone who could say, no, you can't get access to that financial product, because it would be out there and anyone who wanted it could access it on the same terms. It would take away points of failure in the system. We've seen in the past that a poorly managed centralized entity can have massively negative consequences.
Mm.
And so doing something to allow us to eliminate those centralized points of failure could be really valuable. It's not to say that everything is going to be replaced.
Right.
Of course not. But we should be open to having change happen and to having people come in and bring those changes who are new people we're not used to dealing with. And that is a very difficult thing for a regulator. And that's why we need to make sure that we keep talking with the public, that we keep people coming into the agency to work here who maybe bring fresh perspectives. And so, yeah, it's a challenge, and it's one that we should all be on guard for.
Final question here before I let you go. And all politics aside on this, I just want to get your thoughts on the idea. There was proposals about Bitcoin being used as a reserve asset to help alleviate some of the debt problems that we face with the current fiat currency system. And this is a global problem, and other countries are starting to make Bitcoin a legal tender and using it as a reserve. What do you think about that? And do you think something on that level, if it was to happen, would be a major catalyst for the agency and even government as a whole to be like, whoa, wait a minute. Okay, we have to look at this differently.
As a securities regulator, my view on what we're using as reserves, or what we're holding as reserves as a nation, really are irrelevant. I think for me, the more exciting thing is to see people making decisions about what they want to use to, um, you know, we're in a world where there's a new possibility to have people interact directly with each other, as I was just discussing, without these intermediaries, and kind of take more control over their own data, their own financial transactions. And that's interesting to me. And so I'm looking at that from my seat at the SEC and saying, what can I do to make sure that we don't stand in the way of that? Or, on the NFT front, right? People thinking about, how can I use an NFT to monetize my talent? Those are interesting things to me. And those are areas where I want to make sure the SEC isn't blocking people from trying things. The questions around what the national government is going to do are, with respect to Bitcoin, are outside my purview.
Commissioner Peirce, always a pleasure. Thank you. And I hope to have you back on soon, and maybe Congress will get some legislation through, and our next conversation will be a very different one. But thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me, Tony. It's always fun. Take care.